Hello and welcome to this review of my Cherry G80-1000. It's been a while since I did any Cherry stuff, and this is actually a pretty important board. In fact, this review is long overdue. I got it from the recycling center for 50p as I recall, and I've had it for a while actually, I just hadn't gotten around to it. The G80-1000 was the first full-size keyboard Cherry ever made. After this, they put out the much more common G80-3000, which is kind of the archetypal Cherry board. In fact, I've already done 2 reviews of different types of G80-3000, and I'll be doing a third one sometime in the future. I'll put links here and here to the respective reviews for if you're interested. The 1000 first came out in the late 80s, but they actually ran alongside the G80-3000 for a while. And according to a PC magazine from 1992 that I found, it only cost about $5 more than its smaller, younger brother. And both actually cost more than a Northgate OmniKey, which means that this board better be pretty damn good, because that's some stiff competition right there. I'll be comparing it mostly to the 3000 though, to show you what you're getting for those $5. Now let's kick off with the build quality, which on the 3000 is abysmal. It's flimsy and plasticky, there's no metal plates in here at all, and it's just clamped together. There's not a screw anywhere in this motherfucker. The 1000 is also pretty light. In fact, it's only a tiny bit heavier, 1.2 versus 1.1 kilograms, and it feels hollow and rattly. Just listen what happens when I shake it about. And there's a fair amount of flex in the case as well. Quite worrying. But at least it's held together with a few bona fide screws, so a slight improvement there, but not a lot. Much more significant is that the 1000 comes with diodes in every switch, so it has N-key rollover, while the 3000 is stuck with 2-key rollover. I think most people would pay $5 for that alone, but there's some more goodness yet to come. By the way, you might have noticed that the shape is quite familiar, and you'd be right, because, as you can tell from the classic wedge case, this began life as a Model M clone. It's got a dip switch bank at the back that allows you to toggle between AT and XT modes, which means, of course, it uses a 5-pin DIN plug. The cable's pretty impressive too, it's coiled and very long. I measured this fucker with a tape measure, took a while to get that right, and without even pulling the coils too much, it's about 1.8 meters. That's longer than the SDL cable that comes with Model M's. Impressive. 2 little feet at the back, exactly the same design as on the 3000, but the rubber non-slip pads that came with it have come off of this one, unfortunately. The back of the board doesn't show a model sticker, it's a BT sticker instead, which I normally wouldn't call hopeful. But thankfully it has a date code on it for a change, so I actually know when it was made, about mid-1989. Now, 1989 firmly puts it in vintage Cherry territory, and that brings us to the switches, which are vintage Cherry MX Black, an old version of the well-known linear switches. Now, when I say vintage Cherry MX Black, I refer to MX Blacks before a redesign that happened somewhere in the mid-90s, after which they used different materials to make the switches, which Cherry themselves confirmed, by the way. A great many people say that the older Cherry switches, particularly the black ones, feel better than the modern ones. In fact, some say the difference is night and day. Now, because there are a huge amount of myths floating around about mechanical keyboards, I tend to treat this sort of thing skeptically and withhold judgment until I've tried it myself, especially when there isn't really an obvious visible structural change in the design. But fuck me, it's very noticeable in this case. MX Black are the current industry standard linear switches, so I often compare other linear switches to MX Blacks, and bluntly speaking, the Blacks lose out almost every time. I find them scratchy, too heavy, and frankly just boring. I know linear switches are not supposed to feel like roller coaster rides or anything, but they just feel lifeless. These vintage Blacks take care of at least one of the problems though, they're quite obviously a lot smoother. They feel a bit oily actually, almost as if they've been lubed, but I'm pretty sure that's not the case. It just uses a different, slipperier plastic, I think. I suspect it's what Gateron use for their switches nowadays. I wouldn't be surprised if they just make a modern day version of vintage Cherry Blacks, but I'm not an expert on that. Anyway, suffice to say they feel considerably better than modern day Cherries. What's much less well established than their superior key feel is how you can visually recognize them. A persistent myth is that you can recognize them by a big logo on top of the housing. Those are supposedly vintage, and the small logo ones are not. But that was disproven quite a while ago. In fact, the ones in this board are small logo too. Just for fun, I sifted through my box of loose MX black switches and switch parts, and within just a few minutes I'd found 4 distinctly different logos even. From left to right, top aligned ones, bottom aligned ones, left aligned ones, and large logo ones. Some of the switches use different looking cherry pictures too. The one on the left has filled in cherries, and the one on the right has more of an outline. I even found a bunch of switches that had a different slider color, such as the one on the right, more of a dark grey than real black. It's very easy to notice when you look for it, I just hope the camera picks it up. I even found one with a grey top rather than a black one, don't know what that's all about. Anyway, screw the large and small logo theory, here is a much better test. I'm going to use my microphone for this test as my camera isn't very good at picking up soft noises. Here's a vintage MX black switch from up really close. So there's almost no noise at all, you can barely hear it. Now here's a modern one. And again, a few times, one after another. As I'm sure you can tell just by listening to it, the difference is night and day. Apart from the switches, there's another thing Cherry used to do better. Nowadays I mostly find keyboards with these thin lasered PBT caps on them, which are nice and white, but they're not very pretty. Compare that to the ones on the 1000, which are thick ABS double shot caps with delicious, bold, high contrast lettering. Much nicer. Again, easily worth $5, I tell you. I transplanted some of the double shot keycaps onto this board so you can hear them side by side. Are you ready? A few have purple sub-legends too, looks like this is for American users. So, verdict time. What do I think? Well, I think Cherry need to get their act together. This board proves Cherry used to make good switches and great keycaps, and boards with at least passable build quality and even N-key rollover. The modern lack of quality of Cherry's switches is why all kinds of clones like Gatorons are closing in, and some actually make a superior product compared to the real thing, and that's where you need to start worrying as a brand. Anyway, that's it for this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and following is a typing demonstration of me typing on this keyboard.